Hi, welcome back to Adi Files. In this video, we are going to talk about research proposal. So what is a research proposal and what should be included in a research proposal? Well, first of all, a research proposal might be required when you apply for a PhD position or sometimes also in case of master's applications. In master's applications, it has to do something with your master's thesis. And when you apply for a PhD, normally they are trying to see what your research questions are, what would you like to research, and how you would like to do it. So first of all, I'll go through some points which can be included in a research proposal. The best practice here is to simply follow the guidelines from the university or the institute where you're applying. But if there are no guidelines at all, then you can follow these generic points. And first of all, I will just mention these points and then I will go into more detail one by one. So we have title, introduction, research questions, literature review, research methodology, contribution to the field, conclusion, tentative timeline, and bibliography. So let's jump into the details. And first of all, let's talk about the title. So the title of your research proposal should be insightful and easy to understand. Now, some people say it should also be catchy because otherwise readers might not be interested in reading your research proposal, So make sure that your title is insightful, try to say more with less words, and make sure it's also easy to understand, even for those people who are not specifically from this field of studies. Next, we have introduction. So introduction is the section which gives you this opportunity to say a bit more about your research proposal. So let's say you're building on your title, you're trying to give more details to the reader so that the reader gets an idea that, okay, where are we going more or less? So you say like, okay, this has been done more or less in this field. This is what I would like to do. This is how I would like to do it. So kind of like, just like a teaser for your research proposal. So it's just kind of like you are building this whole background, let's say for your further sections of the research proposal. Next, we have the research questions. This section is the foundation of your research proposal because here you explain what exactly is it that you would like to examine in detail, the subject on which you would like to research. So your research questions should be very clear and concrete, easy to understand, and should give an impression that you know that more or less what you are trying to do. Because sometimes what happens is if this section is very abstract, then the professor might get this impression that you don't really know what direction you want to go, So it's good to say that, at the same time, you don't have to be very specific here. Depending upon your field, of course, you have to find this medium ground where you give this good impression that you know what you are trying to do. At the same time, it gives you more room to really change your direction a little bit afterwards as well. That you can do anyway once you start your PhD. Research proposal is there just to give kind of like a first impression to the professor that shows that, okay, the person knows like in what direction he or she would like to go. And then later, of course, once you start your PhD, you sit together with your professor and then you also define in more detail, like, how things will move further. The next section is the literature review. So previously you mentioned what your research questions are. So what would you like to research? And in the literature review, you say what has already been done in this domain, in this area. So you build on some past work, from different researchers, and then you give reference to these books or these journal or conference papers, and you say that this is what has been done and this is what I would like to do in this domain. Next, we have research methodology, and this is also one of the most important sections of your research proposal. Why? Because, as I said previously, the professors want to know your research questions, what you want to do, and then they're interested in seeing how you would like to approach those questions. So in your research methodology, you explain how you are going to, let's say, examine that topic. So for example, you would like to do some surveys, you would like to run some experiments, then you have to say it that how you would like to do it. And then, for example, if you choose some specific methodology, you also have to explain why you are choosing this. Why is this methodology better than some other methods, in this field? So for example, when you talk about experiments, you can mention the details, the names and everything of those experiments. If you talk about surveys, then you should say what kind of surveys there will be, how many participants there will be, and then based on these surveys or these experiments you will generate some data, right? Then you have to explain what are you going to do with this data. So what will be your analysis technique? How are you going to analyze this data? I mean, your statistical approach, your analytical methods, and so on. So once we know more or less the research methodology and analysis techniques and results, next section is contribution to the field. This is where you go in more detail about your results, because you had like a rough direction that this is what I think more or less. And then by doing this, these results will help this field in this particular way. As I said earlier, you don't have to say that the result is going to be this and this. I mean, you're saying that when I will analyze this thing, if the result comes out to be, so for example, let's say if it's a yes no question, right? Does this happen by doing this, this, and this? So then you say, if that really happens, if the answer is yes, then what kind of contribution will it give to my field? And if the answer is no, then again you say what kind of contribution there will be. So for example, you said, yes, I think answer will be yes, and then this is how it's going to be. But the results doesn't matter if they are positive or negative. The results always contribute, let's say, to the research in a way that if you have already tested something and that didn't go according to the plan, then at least other people know from your experience, from your, let's say, results that, okay, this is how it goes when we do the things in this particular way. So that's also like learning for them, So there are no right and wrong results. The results of the research normally, let's say, in most cases, they always contribute to the field. So you have to talk about this contribution. You have to say, for example, that, okay, this challenges some common theories in this field, or you say that, okay, this is going to improve some processes, or you say that this is just going to be a baseline for some further use cases. So you say that nothing much has been done in this field, and based on these results, this is going to give researchers a foundation to explore then, let's say, different directions of this field. So we are more or less done. Next we have conclusion. And conclusion is not really a restatement of your introduction, but rather this is a section where you highlight, or let's say summarize, the key points from your research proposal, So for example, let's say if a person says, okay, I don't have really time to go through all the sections of the research proposal, that person should be able to just go through your title and introduction and then through your conclusion and get like a, kind of like a rough understanding of what the research proposal is about. So you should make sure that the conclusion is not really long. It should be, again, the same thing like in title or introduction. Try to say more with less words and try to highlight key points from your research proposal so that just reading conclusion, the person gets like kind of like a rough understanding of what's going on. And if they really want to know like, okay, what was happening, then of course they can go through the research proposal to see those details. You don't have to mention all those details in your conclusion. Another section is the tentative timeline. Now I'm saying another section and not the next section as I was saying previously, because some people like to put this section somewhere in the beginning of their research proposal and not really after the conclusion. As I said earlier, if there is a guideline from your university, you should follow it. But if there is no guideline, then for example, you can put it after the conclusion because this just really shows like a rough timeline. I mean, as the word says, tentative. So it's not really something kind of like, which is really fixed in the very beginning. You say this is more or less how it's going to be, and how you can work on it depends upon where you're applying and how long it takes in that country for a PhD. Or for example, in case of the master's thesis, how long it takes normally for the master's thesis. So let's say generally it takes 3 years for a PhD and 6 months for a master's thesis. Now, based on this timeline, you should make a roadmap and say that I have some kind of milestones. So you can say, okay, for 6 months, I'm going to work on the literature review. Next 6 months, I have experimentation. Next 6 months, I have analysis and so on. So it's just like a rough idea which you are giving to the university, to the professors, so that they know more or less that, okay, the person knows what he or she wants to do, I mean, more or less, the word itself, I mean, the proposal, the research proposal, the whole thing is just about proposing what you would like to do, how you would like to do it, and how long it's going to take, right? So it's kind of like you are proposing a project, right? And then you're talking about this is more or less how it's going to be. Because if you don't know about your project, if you don't know anything, you're just like, yeah, I would like to do something here and there, then the university or the professors might not be so interested in your application because they might see kind of lack of motivation because you haven't done any work really to kind of show them your motivation about that specific research topic. And the last section is bibliography. This is also a section which can be called references, and as any other research work, when you work on, like, say, a research paper or so, when you're referring to other people's work, of course, you have your citations, and then you mention those references. It's the same thing in a research proposal. In bibliography, you mention all those references which you used during your research proposal. Most of them, I think, will be used during the literature review, or, for example, maybe through the methodology section. And then depending upon the citation style, I mean, there are different citation styles depending upon your field. Whatever citation style applies to you, you can then follow that citation style and then just list all the references you used throughout your research proposal. So now that we know what should be included in a research proposal, let's briefly talk about the format of a research proposal. So how many words, how many pages, and so on. Well, sometimes it becomes hard to work with the number of pages because, depending upon the font size and margins and everything, you can have less or more pages for the same text, for the same number of words. So normally it's better to work with the word limit. And as I said earlier, if there is a guideline from your university, you should follow it. If there is no guideline, you can ask them if there is a guideline. If not, I mean, a general rule is 2,000 to 2,500 words for a research proposal. Of course, you should check with more people in your domain to really see what is kind of like a good practice in that particular domain. But if you don't know, then 2,000 is, let's say, a good range because it's not kind of too short, which shows that you haven't done your research in a good way about the topic. And it's also not too long, which might make it boring for the readers, I hope I could give you a good overview of a research proposal. Of course, you should check with the university and with people from your domain to make appropriate changes. This was just a generic overview. If you have any questions, mention them in the comments. For further information on a research proposal and other topics related to study abroad, visit the website adifiles.com. Have a great day.